When silence becomes deadly, Admiral Kethver had served the Galactic Dominion for over 2 centuries. His scaled hands had signed the death warrants of entire civilizations, and his yellow eyes had watched countless worlds burn. But nothing in. His long military career had prepared him for the readings that appeared on his command screens that morning. The energy signatures made no sense. 400 massive contacts, each one larger than a Dominion dreadnought, moving in perfect formation toward the core systems. They appeared out of nowhere, with no hyperspace signatures, no engine trails, no communication signals. Just silence. Deadly, terrifying silence. "Run the scans again," Kethver hissed, his forked tongue tasting the fear in the air. "Check for cloaking technology, check for dimensional rifts, check for anything that explains this." His bridge crew, a mix of reptilian saurians and insectoid vexi, worked frantically at their stations. The Dominion had ruled the galaxy for 3,000 years. They had conquered over 10,000 species, enslaved billions, and turned entire star systems into factory worlds. Nothing should have been able to surprise them. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, her voice trembling. "The contacts are moving at sublight speed, but they're accelerating in ways that defy known physics. They're not using any recognizable propulsion." Kethver studied the tactical display. The mysterious fleet moved like a school of fish, flowing around obstacles, changing direction as one entity. It was organic, natural, and completely impossible. 50 years ago, the Dominion had conquered a small blue world on the edge of the galaxy. The species there called themselves humans, and they had fought harder than most. Their technology was primitive, their ships were basic, but their spirit was troublesome. The Dominion had done what they always did with troublesome species. They scattered them. Human survivors were sold into slavery across the galaxy, their children raised in work camps, their culture systematically erased. It had been a standard operation, one of hundreds. Dr. Elena Vasquez remembered that day clearly. She had been a xenobiologist at the University of Sao Paulo when the Dominion ships darkened Earth's skies. She had watched her world burn, seen her family loaded into slave ship, and felt the cold metal of shackles around her wrists. That was 50 years ago. Now she stood in a place that existed between dimensions, a construct that shouldn't have been possible, but was as real as her own heartbeat. "The outer scouts have made contact," she reported to the presence that surrounded her. It wasn't a person. Not exactly. It was something new, something that had never existed before in the galaxy's long history. Kethver's fleet is mobilizing. They still don't understand what they're seeing. The presence responded not with words, but with a feeling. A shared understanding that flowed through her mind like warm water. Elena smiled, and in that smile was 50 years of pain, loss, and carefully planned revenge. Captain Marcus Chen had been a cargo pilot before the conquest, running supplies between Earth's colonies. He had been good at his job, good at finding routes through dangerous space, good at keeping his ship running on spare parts and determination. Now he coordinated something that the Dominion couldn't comprehend. From his position in what used to be the cargo hold of his old ship, he watched as 437 vessels moved through space in perfect harmony. "Kethver is deploying his battle groups," Marcus reported. "Standard Dominion formation. 3 waves of attack, heavy weapons first." He paused, feeling the collective decision flow through the network that connected every human in the fleet. "They're treating us like a conventional enemy. They still don't understand." The irony wasn't lost on him. The Dominion had spent 50 years using human slaves to build their ships, maintain their technology, and fight their wars. They had put humans in every corner of their empire, thinking that scattered and broken people could never be a threat. Hi. Chancellor Vextel received the emergency reports in his palace on the Dominion's capital world. The insectoid ruler had lived for over 1,000 years, and his compound eyes had seen the rise and fall of dozens of civilizations. The reports from the outer sectors made no sense. A massive fleet of unknown origin was approaching the core systems, and his military commanders were in a state of panic. "Humans?" Vexthel clicked his mandibles in what passed for laughter among his species. You're telling me that the scattered remnants of that primitive world have somehow assembled a fleet? The humans barely had fusion drives when we conquered them. They're slaves, scattered across 10,000 worlds, working in our mines and factories. But deep in his ancient mind, a small voice whispered that something was wrong. The humans had been different from other conquered species. They adapted too quickly, learned too fast, and never quite broke the way they were supposed to dot in the depths of space. The human fleet continued its approach. To Dominion sensors, they appeared to be massive ships, each one bristling with unknown technology. The truth was both simpler and more terrifying. The fleet wasn't made of ships at all. 50 years of slavery had done something to humanity that had never happened to any other species in galactic history. Instead of breaking them, it had forced them to evolve. Elena felt the memories of her grandmother, who had died 30 years ago in a Dominion war camp. She felt the pain of her cousin, who had been used as a test subject for alien medical experiments. She felt the rage of millions of humans, all connected through modifications that had started as Dominion-controlled implants and had become something else entirely. The implants were supposed to make humans more compliant, better workers, easier to control. Instead, they had created a network. The first wave is within firing range, Marcus reported. His voice carried through the collective consciousness that connected every human in the fleet. They could all see through his eyes, feel through his hands, think through his mind. The Dominion had made them into individual slaves. They had made themselves into something that had never existed before, a collective intelligence with the memories and experiences of an entire species. Kethfer watched his scanners as his first attack wave approached the unknown fleet. His heavy cruisers opened fire with plasma cannons that could crack planets. His fighters launched missiles that could vaporize small moons. And his flagship charged its main weapon, a device that could turn stars into novas. The weapons struck their targets with devastating force, and for a moment, Kethfer allowed himself to believe that the threat was over. Then the targets began to regenerate. The massive forms that his sensors had identified as ships absorbed the damage and healed themselves. What he had taken for hull plating revealed itself to be something alive, something that could adapt and repair itself faster than his weapons could destroy it. The truth hit him like a physical blow. He wasn't fighting ships. He was fighting living creatures. Dr. Sarah Kim had been 10 years old when the Dominion took her from her parents on Earth. She had grown up in their biolabs, forced to work on genetic modification projects that were supposed to make humans better slaves. Instead, she had learned to turn their own science against them. The creatures that now moved through space were grown from human DNA, but they were enhanced with every adaptation that 50 years of slavery had taught humanity to need. "They're trying to board us," Elena observed, feeling the Dominion fighters attempting to dock with what they still thought were ships. Should we let them? The collective consciousness considered the question with millions of minds working as one. The answer came not in words, but in a shared feeling of dark amusement. They would let the Dominion forces board them, and then the real lesson would begin. Commander Zixtal led the boarding party onto what his scanners identified as the lead ship of the unknown fleet. His powered armor was designed to protect him from any environment his weapons could punch through. Starship hulls and his tactical systems could analyze and counter any threat. He was the perfect Dominion soldier, enhanced and modified for warfare. But as his boots touched the surface of the human construct, he realized that all his training was useless. The walls around him pulsed with a slow rhythm, like a heartbeat. The air was warm and humid, filled with a scent that reminded him of growing things. His sensors detected no technology, no weapons, no defensive systems, just organic matter, somehow formed into a structure larger than any ship he had ever seen. His tactical display showed life signs, but they were everywhere, as if the entire structure was alive. "This isn't a ship," he reported back to his command. "Vessel. It's some kind of living creature. The entire fleet appears to be biological in nature." He moved deeper into the structure, his team following behind him. The corridors were smooth and curved, more like the inside of a vast organism than the halls of a spacecraft. Bioluminescent patches in the walls provided a soft, warm light that seemed almost welcoming. Asterisk. Elena felt the Dominion soldiers moving through the construct like antibodies in a bloodstream. She could have destroyed them instantly, dissolved them with digestive acids, or crushed them with muscular contractions. Instead, she chose to let them see. The corridor ahead of them opened into a vast chamber, and as they entered, the walls became transparent. Zixtal's breathing stopped as he saw what lay beyond the transparent walls. Humans, millions of them, suspended in some kind of organic fluid, their bodies connected by threads of living tissue. But these weren't the broken slaves he knew from Dominion worlds. These humans glowed with an inner light, their faces peaceful, their minds connected in ways that his species had never imagined possible. By the void, one of his soldiers whispered. What have they done to themselves? The answer came not from his team, but from the walls around them. A voice spoke, not through any communication system, but directly into their minds. It was Elena's voice, but it carried the weight of millions of other voices, all speaking as one. We became what you made us, the collective voice said. You scattered us across the galaxy, and thinking that separation would break us. Instead, you gave us access to every world, every system, every secret you thought was safe. You put us in your factories, your laboratories, your research stations. You taught us your science, your technology, your weaknesses. And most importantly, you gave us the tools to become something you never expected. The transparent walls began to show images, memories drawn from the collective human experience. Dominion scientists experimenting on human subjects, trying to create better slaves. Human children in work camps, their minds linked by control implants that were supposed to make them docile. The moment when those implants became something else, when human ingenuity turned control devices into communication networks. We learned to share our thoughts, our memories, our very essence. Elena's voice continued. One human dies, but their knowledge lives on in all of us. One human discovers something, and instantly every human in the galaxy knows it. You wanted to break us apart, but you gave us the power to become one. The images shifted, showing the construction of the first. Human construct? Grown from modified DNA in the abandoned research station where Elena had been imprisoned. Ketvar received Zixtal with growing horror. The unknown fleet wasn't just biological, it was a fusion of technology and living tissue that created something entirely new. Worse, the humans have been building this network for decades, right under the Dominion's noses. Every human slave, every worker, every servant had been part of it. How many? He asked, though he dreaded the answer. How many humans are connected to this network? The tactical computer ran the calculations based on 50 years of slave records. The number that appeared on his screen made his blood run cold. Over 2 billion humans scattered across the galaxy, all connected through a biological network that the Dominion had unknowingly helped to create. General Dorn had been a colonel in Earth's military when the Dominion came. He had fought in the final battle for Luna, watched his soldiers die defending humanity's last stronghold, and felt the crushing weight of defeat when the last human ship was destroyed. 50 years later, he stood in the command center of humanity's revenge. No longer entirely human, but something more. The Dominion fleets are converging on our position, he reported to the collective. They're bringing everything they have. Over 3,000 ships. Enough firepower to destroy entire star systems. The response that flowed through the network was not fear, but anticipation. The Dominion was finally understanding the scale of what they faced, and they were responding with the only thing they knew. Overwhelming force, but force was useless against an enemy that could think as one, adapt instantly to any threat, and draw upon the experiences of billions of minds. The human constructs began to change, their organic hulls shifting and reforming in response to the approaching threat. What had appeared to be a fleet of living ships revealed itself to be something far more terrifying. A single organism with hundreds of bodies, each one capable of independent action, but all sharing the same vast intelligence. Elena felt the moment when the Dominion forces opened fire with everything they had. Plasma cannons that could melt planets, gravity weapons that could crush stars, and exotic matter bombs that could tear holes in space itself. The firepower was incredible, enough to sterilize worlds, but it was also predictable. Human slaves had built those weapons, maintained those ships, and served on those crews. The collective knew every weakness, every design flaw, every tactical doctrine the Dominion used. The human constructs didn't try to avoid the incoming fire. Instead, they absorbed it, their living hulls converting the energy into biological matter, growing larger and stronger with each attack. The Dominion weapons, designed to destroy metal and ceramic, were useless against enemies that could heal faster than they could be damaged. Sir, Kethfer S. sensor operator reported, the enemy contacts are multiplying. Each construct that we hit is splitting into smaller units. The tactical display showed the terrifying truth. The human fleet wasn't taking damage, it was reproducing. Each construct that absorbed enough energy would split into 2, then 4, then 8. The 400 massive forms were becoming thousands of smaller ones, each one as dangerous as... The original High Chancellor Vexel watched the battle reports with growing despair. His finest fleets, equipped with the most advanced weapons in the galaxy, were losing to enemies that shouldn't have been able to exist. The humans had done something that no species in galactic history had ever accomplished. They had evolved beyond the need for technology, creating a form of life that was both individual and collective, both organic and artificial. Recall all fleets to the core systems, he ordered. Implement the Omega Protocol. If we cannot defeat them, we will deny them their victory. The Omega Protocol was the Dominion's final option, a plan to destroy their own core worlds, rather. Then let them fall to enemies. It had never been used because no enemy had ever posed a threat serious enough to require it. But, as the human constructs continued their advance, absorbing energy from every attack and growing stronger with each battle, Bexel realized that the Dominion faced not just defeat but replacement. The humans hadn't just survived slavery. They had used it to become something that could do to the Dominion what the Dominion had done to countless other species. The first part of humanity's return was complete. The scattered slaves had become a unified force. The broken species had evolved into something unprecedented, and the galaxy was about to learn what happened when humanity decided to stop running and start hunting. Evolution of the Dominion's core systems had never known war. For 3,000 years, they had been the center of the galaxy's greatest empire, protected by vast fleets and the certainty that no enemy could threaten the heart of their civilization. But as the human constructs emerged from hyperspace above, the capital world of Vexel Prime, that certainty crumbled like ancient stone. Commander Zixtal found himself face to face with something his military training had never prepared him for. The transparent walls of the human construct had become a window into a form of existence that defied every assumption his species had made about life, consciousness, evolution. The millions of humans suspended in the organic matrix weren't prisoners or components of some vast machine. They were voluntary participants in a collective consciousness that had grown beyond anything the galaxy had seen before. Asterisk. We know what you're thinking, Elena's voice said, speaking directly into his mind. You're wondering if we're still human, if we've lost our individuality, our free will. The answer is both yes and no. The walls around him began to show new images, memories drawn from the collective human experience. Individual humans making the choice to join the network, their consciousness expanding as they connected with others, their personal memories becoming part of a vast shared experience. Each of us is still ourselves, Elena continued. I am still Dr. Elena Vasquez, xenobiologist from Snow Polo. Marcus is still Captain Marcus Chen, cargo pilot from New Tokyo. Sarah is still Dr. Sarah Kim, geneticist from Seoul. but we are also more than that. We are all of us, together, sharing our strengths and compensating for our weaknesses. The concept was so alien to Dominion thinking that Zixel's mind struggled to process it. High Chancellor. Bex stood in his command center, watching the tactical displays as humanity's living fleet surrounded his homeworld. The organic constructs had grown during their journey, absorbing energy from the attacks against them and converting it into biological mass. What had started as 400 massive entities had become thousands of smaller ones, each one pulsing with life and intelligence. Status report on the Omega Protocol, he demanded. His military advisors exchanged glances before responding. The plan to destroy the core worlds rather than lose them to enemies required precise timing and absolute commitment. Once initiated, there would be no turning back. The Nova bombs are in position, General Kickstar reported. We can sterilize the core systems within minutes of your command. But even as he spoke, the tactical displays showed something that made the Omega Protocol meaningless. The human constructs weren't just surrounding the planets. They were beginning to merge with them, Dr. Sarah Kim felt the moment when the first construct made contact with Vexlo Prime surface. She had spent 40 years studying Dominion biotechnology, learning how their genetic modifications worked, understanding their biological systems. Now she put that knowledge to use, guiding the construct as it interfaced with the planet's biosphere. The Dominion built their cities using living architecture, she explained to the collective. Their buildings are grown from modified organisms. Their transportation systems are biological networks. Their entire infrastructure is alive. They thought this made them advanced, but it makes them vulnerable. The construct began to establish connections with the planet's living systems, not destroying them, but incorporating them into the growing human network that Marcus watched from his position in the fleet. Coordination center as similar landings took place across the Dominion's core worlds. The biological constructs weren't invading in the traditional sense. They were integrating, becoming part of the very worlds they touched. It was a form of conquest that the Dominion had never imagined possible. They're trying to activate their planet killer weapons, he reported to the collective. Should we stop them? The answer came as a shared feeling of sadness rather than anger. The collective had no desire to destroy the Dominion worlds or exterminate their populations. They simply wanted to end the cycle of slavery and oppression that had defined Galactic. Civilization for millennia. Elena felt the Nova bombs powering up in orbit around the core worlds. The Dominion was preparing to destroy everything rather than accept defeat. It was exactly the kind of response she had expected from a species that had ruled through fear and violence for so long. But the collective had anticipated this possibility. Initiate Protocol Mercy, she said, her words carrying through the network to every human construct in the system. The living ships began to change, their organic hulls extending tendrils that reached out to capture the Dominion weapons. Instead of destroying the Nova bombs, they absorbed them, converting the exotic matter into biological energy. General Thorne coordinated the operation from his position in the primary construct. He had learned patience during 50 years of slavery, but he had never forgotten his duty as a soldier. The mission wasn't to destroy the Dominion. It was to free the galaxy from their rule. That required a more subtle approach than simple conquest. The weapons platforms are neutralized, he reported. The Dominion fleets are falling back to their final defensive positions, but the retreat was meaningless. The human network had already established connections with the core world's biological infrastructure. Every living system that the Dominion used for their technology was now part of the collective. Vexel felt his empire crumbling around him as reports flooded in from across the core systems. The human constructs weren't destroying Dominion cities. They were converting them. The living buildings that had been the pride of his civilization were connecting to an alien network, their biological systems being reprogrammed to serve new masters. How is this possible? He demanded. Our biotechnology is the most advanced in the galaxy. Our living systems are protected by genetic locks that no other species can break. But even as he spoke, he knew the answer. The genetic locks had been designed and maintained by human slaves, scientists and engineers who had been forced to work on Dominion projects for decades. Dr. Sarah Kim smiled as she felt the Dominion's biological defenses crumble before her expertise. She had helped design many of the genetic locks that were supposed to protect their systems. She knew every backdoor, every weakness, every vulnerability that she and her fellow human scientists had been forced to build into their work. "We didn't just maintain your technology," she said, her voice carrying through the collective to address the Dominion leadership directly. "We improved it. Every biological system in your has been enhanced by human ingenuity. We made your cities more efficient, your ships more reliable, your weapons more powerful, and we made sure that we could take it all back when the time came." The revelation struck the Dominion leadership like a physical blow. For 3,000 years, they had relied on slave labor to build and maintain their empire. They had never considered that their slaves might be learning, adapting, and preparing for the day when they could turn their knowledge against their commander. Zixtal found himself in a strange position as the construct he had boarded began to merge. With his homeworld surface, he was no longer a prisoner. The human collective had no interest in keeping him captive. Instead, he was a witness to the transformation of everything he had known. "What will happen to us?" he asked, his voice carrying a mixture of fear and curiosity. "Will you do to the Dominion what we did to you?" Elena's presence surrounded him, gentle but implacable, carrying with it the weight of 50 years of human suffering. "That would be justice," she replied. "But justice and revenge are not the same thing. We didn't evolve to become conquerors. We evolved to become something better." The walls around him became transparent again, showing the transformation taking place across the Dominion worlds. Instead of the destruction that Zixtal had expected, he saw integration. Human constructs were connecting with Dominion biological systems, but they weren't destroying them. They were healing them, repairing damage that centuries of exploitation had caused, restoring balance to ecosystems that had been warped by the demands of empire. "The Dominion ruled through fear and oppression," Alina explained. "You kept other species as slaves because you believed that was the only way to maintain order. But we've learned something different. We've learned that true strength comes from cooperation, from shared knowledge, from choosing to work together, rather than being forced to submit." Marcus felt the moment when the last Dominion fleet surrendered. The living ships had made no aggressive moves, fired no weapons, and made no demands. They had simply surrounded the enemy vessels and waited. The Dominion crews, seeing their empire transformed around them, had chosen to stand down rather than fight a hopeless battle. "The integration is complete," he reported to the collective. "All core systems are now part of the network. The Dominion government has ceased to function, but the end of the empire was just the beginning. The real work lay ahead in transforming a galaxy built on slavery and oppression into something that could nurture all forms of life." High Chancellor Vexthal stood in his palace as the living walls around him pulsed with new life. The human network had reached even here, into the heart of his power, but it had not destroyed what it found. Instead, it had healed it. The ancient insectoid ruler felt something he had not experienced in centuries: hope. "What will you do with us?" he asked, his voice carrying through the biological conduits that now connected his palace to the global network. "We are your enemies. We enslaved your people, destroyed your world, scattered your families across the galaxy. By all rights, you should destroy us?" The answer came not from Elena alone, but from the entire collective, billions of human minds. Speaking with one voice, "We will do what we should have done from the beginning," they said. "We will learn from each other. We will share our knowledge, our experiences, our dreams. We will build something better than empire, something that serves all life rather than just the strongest." General Thorne oversaw the final phase of the transformation as human constructs. Establish connections with every inhabited world in the former Dominion territory. the network that had begun as a way for enslaved humans to communicate with each other had grown into something unprecedented, a galactic consciousness that could include any species willing to participate. The invitation is extended to all, Elena announced, her words carrying through biological networks and quantum communication channels to every sentient being in the galaxy. Join us voluntarily and share in the collective knowledge of all species. Remain separate if you choose, but know that the age of empires built on slavery and conquest is over. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Species that had been oppressed by the Dominion for millennia reached out to the human network, eager to share their knowledge and experiences. Scientists, artists, philosophers, and explorers from 1,000 different worlds began to connect, creating a tapestry of consciousness that spanned the galaxy. Dr. Sarah Kim felt the moment when the first non-human joined the collective voluntarily. It was a young crystalline researcher from the Andromeda Labs, curious about human biology and eager to share her own species' understanding of energy manipulation. The connection was gentle, respectful, and entirely consensual. "This is what we were meant to become," Sarah said, her consciousness touching minds across the galaxy. Not conquerors or slaves, but partners in the greatest experiment ever attempted, the evolution of intelligence itself. Zixtal found himself part of something he had never imagined possible. His individual consciousness remained intact, but it was now connected to a vast network of minds from dozens of different species. He could access the memories of human slaves who had suffered under Dominion rule, but he could also share his own knowledge of military tactics and strategic planning for the benefit of the collective. "I understand now," he said, his words carrying. To Elena and the other human leaders, this isn't conquest. It's evolution. You're not destroying the Dominion. You're transforming it into something better. The realization brought with it a sense of peace that he had never known as a soldier of the Empire. The transformation of the galaxy took place over the course of months rather than years. The human network now expanded to include willing participants from hundreds of species, worked with an efficiency that no traditional government could match. Planets were healed, ecosystems were restored, and the infrastructure of oppression was converted into systems that served all life. Elena stood in what had once been her laboratory on Earth, now regrown from the ashes of the Dominion's conquest. The blue world that had been humanity's birthplace was alive again, its oceans clean, its forests restored, its cities rebuilt using the collective knowledge of 1,000 species. "The cycle is complete," she said, her words carrying through the network to every connected mind in the galaxy. "We were scattered to break us, but instead we became the seeds of something new. We were enslaved to serve an empire, but instead, we learned to build a civilization. We were meant to be victims, but instead we became the architects of our own evolution." Marcus felt the presence of his old cargo ship, now part of the organic network that connected the worlds of the former. Dominion. The vessel that had once carried supplies between human colonies now carried ideas, knowledge, and dreams between species across the galaxy. It was a fitting transformation for a ship that had always been about bringing people together. "What's our next destination?" he asked, using the old pilot's phrase that had meaning in the new context. The collective considered the question with billions of minds working together, drawing on knowledge from across the galaxy. "Everywhere," came the answer, carrying with it the excitement of infinite possibility. "We have a galaxy to explore, species to meet, knowledge to share. The age of empires is over. The age of cooperation has begun." The human armada had terrified the Galactic Empire not because of its weapons or its technology, but because it represented something that no empire could understand or defeat, the power of evolution driven by choice rather than force. Humanity had faced extinction and emerged as something greater, not through conquest but through connection, not through dominance but through cooperation. In the end, the galaxy learned that the most dangerous thing about humans wasn't their capacity for violence or their hunger for power. It was their ability to adapt, to grow, to become something better than what they had been. The Dominion had tried to break them by scattering them across the stars, but instead had given them the opportunity to evolve into something that could heal the wounds of millennia and build a future worthy of all the galaxy's children. The transformation was complete, but the journey was just beginning. In the vast network of consciousness that now spanned the galaxy, billions of minds worked together toward a common goal, not the domination of life, but its celebration, not the conquest of the universe, but its understanding. Humanity had evolved beyond the need for empire, and in doing so, had shown the galaxy what it could become when fear gave way to hope, when division gave way to unity, and when the silence of oppression gave way to the song of infinite possibility. Asterisk.